Hey everyone, it's TK Friday, and this is the joy of editing with yours truly, Dave Kelly. On today's TK Friday episode, this one's called Dodging and Burning Workshop. I pulled together a bunch of different ways we can dodge and burn with the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. So sit back, relax, and stay tuned. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly, and thank you for joining me for yet another TK Friday. It's good to have you aboard. And as I said in the intro, there's a bunch of different ways that we can dodge and burn using the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. Now, these are probably not all the ways you can dodge and burn with the TK8 plugin for Photoshop, but there are many good and useful ones. And this is going to be a resource guide for you, so don't forget, download the PDF notes because all the information will be there for you on how to use these different techniques. Now, which technique is right for you? Well, you have to decide for yourself because, as you know, in Photoshop, there's many different ways of achieving the exact same result. So choose a method that you enjoy working with the most and utilize that method. Let me just start out by saying, why dodge and burn? What's it all about? Now, I have my reasons for dodging and burning, but I asked Tony the other day, Tony Kuiper, hey Tony, why dodge and burn? And these are his answers. It's useful to create better light in situations where the light isn't ideal. And a lot of times we find that when we're out there shooting landscapes or any type of photography, unless you're in a studio with studio lighting. And for the second answer, it's also a way to creatively add light to images to convey your personal impression of the scene. And you know what? I couldn't agree more with him. I think this is really the epitome of why we dodge and burn. Or as some like to say, burn and dodge. By the way, if you don't yet own the TK8 plugin for Photoshop, you can click on my affiliate link found in the description below this video. Just click on that link. It'll take you to the TK web store where you can purchase the TK8 plugin for Photoshop along with training videos. And if you use my promo code DK15, you'll save 15% off your entire purchase. And when you do that, you're supporting the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. And for that, I truly thank you. Now today I'll be using this image to show you these different dodging and burning techniques. So let's start out easy. This is one I've never shown before, so let's take a look at it. And don't forget to download the PDF notes. There'll be a Dropbox link directly below the video in the description. You'll have to click the More or Show More button to open up the description so you could find that Dropbox link, but it is there. Now for this one, what we're going to do is click on the luminosity mask button. And just like I do my opening move and all my full edits where I do the balance and contrast, this is kind of a derivative from that. And what you're going to do is click on Midtones 3. That's going to protect your shadows, your darkest shadows and your highlights from clipping. And then you're just going to output this to a color grading tool. Now, the nice thing about this technique is you're dodging and burning all on one layer, which is kind of unique. Now, this dodging and burning is global. In other words, it goes over the entire image. You're not picking and choosing where the dodging and burning goes, except in the shadows and highlights. When I do my balance and contrast adjustment, I'm working with shadows, midtones, and highlights. But for this dodging and burning, we're only dealing with shadows for burning and highlights for dodging. Let's start out with shadows. Let me click on this black block. And I'm going to start dragging it to the left. Now, you don't see any change until I release the mouse click. So I'm going to release it like right about here. And see how all the shadows have gotten darker. Now, I want to make a note here. Don't forget, we have this Mids 3 mask on here. So basically what you're doing here is you'll be darkening the shadow and the highlights within the selected range. And that is all because of this mask here, which is protecting our darkest dark and our lightest light from clipping. Now, how do we determine where to drag the slider to? Well, really just look at your image and sample different settings here. So if I want those shadows darker, I can move it to the left a little bit more. So that's totally up to you. It's going to be different for each and every image. Now let's move on to the highlights. We're skipping midtones. We're not touching midtones. So I'm going to start to drag this to the right, and we're going to watch the highlights. Can you see them? I'm going to move it a little bit more and maybe even a little bit more. Maybe right about here. Now let's take a look. Here is the before and here's the after. Now remember, that is globally. And don't forget, you have this opacity. If it's too strong, you can just drag back this opacity. but you've just dodged and burned your entire image with just one color grading tool. Now, one other nice feature about this, if you want to like color grade your shadows, you can click on your shadow block and move this black block around to a color grade of your choice. Same with the highlights, you can move it to a color grade of your choice. So that's kind of nice. Now, I can show you also a way to make a more selective dodging and burning on this same layer. And to do that, all you need to do is put this into a group. So come to the CX or Combo panel and click on the left side of this group icon. When you do, it puts this adjustment inside of a group with a black mask hiding everything. Now, you could just take your brush, and you would want to get a white brush. So I'm going to click on this white brush. I'll adjust my brush opacity to 100%, 0. And I'm just going to paint. See how I can just kind of paint here, kind of sculpt this image a little bit, paint on these shadows here. Now, I can reduce that opacity to say like 70% and have the effect not quite as strong in some of these areas here. So you can vary that opacity on these tree shadow areas. Now remember, the cool thing here is if I go over this area, the lighter areas will get lighter. This area is lighter here because remember, we're dodging and burning all on one layer here. So if I come across here, see how I can just paint some light here and here, you know, maybe right there, maybe drop my opacity down to about 50% and hit along here, make my brush a little smaller. You get the drift, right? And this is, you know, where you can really kind of make this image look the way you want it to look. And throw some here. And if I go over shadow area, it gets darker. If I go over highlight area, it gets lighter. So that's kind of unique, I think, having one layer to do all your dodging and burning. And you know, this tree up here, remember the shadow areas will go darker, the highlight areas will go lighter. So it's pretty cool. And here's my mask over here. So that's our first technique, but that's pretty simple, right? Hey, let me know in the comments section below what you think about the different techniques that I'm showing you here. I'd really love to hear from you. And if you have a special way that you like to dodge and burn, let us know in the comments section below as well. And also, by the way, I'm thinking of doing a video on the hidden features found in the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. If you'd be interested in seeing something like that, please let me know in the comments section below. I think that would be a really cool video because there's a ton of hidden features that a lot of us don't even know are there. So let me know in the comments section if you want to see a video on hidden features. Let's move on to the next method. Oh, let me get rid of this color grading tool by clicking the X. I've deleted the layer from the previous method. And now let's get a curves adjustment layer. Put a black mask on it to hide everything that I'm going to do. And then we're going to put a multiply blend mode on this layer. We don't see anything because the black mask is hiding it. If I click this X here, you can see the entire image gets dark, right? So if I click it again, you can see what the mask is doing. This basically, the X just disables your mask, by the way. And now what we're going to do, I'm going to burn first because I'm using multiply. Multiply darkens, screen lightens. We'll use screen for dodging in this method, but right now we're burning, so we're going to go with multiply. Let's come up and click on the luminosity mask icon. So now we want to find dark tones. And so let's click on darks 1. The lighter areas are going to be the darkest areas. We're going to narrow that down because I'm really looking for really darker shadows, and I think maybe somewhere right around in there. Now, we always have the levels or curves adjustment where we can refine. So I usually use levels. I'm going to click on the levels adjustment here and maybe take this shadow slider, drag it to the right, and tighten this up a little bit to maybe right around here. And we can even drag the highlight slider to the left a little bit to lighten up the selection, and even the midtones to the left, just so I get a little stronger effect. So don't forget about that. And then we're going to output this to the layer we created, that curves adjustment layer, and that is this icon right here. By the way, you don't see the tooltips. If I hold my Option on a Mac or Alt on the PC and hover over any button, you'll see information about what that button does. This button here is Output Apply. This button applies the on-screen mask as a layer mask. Okay, so you're going to put this mask onto that layer by clicking this button. And now when I do that, now this is a global burn. Here is the before and here is the after. Now if it's too strong, all you need to do is adjust the opacity to the left, and ease up on the adjustment. I'm going to leave it up at full. We're going to move on to dodging in a minute, but I'm going to show you how we can do this same thing as a selective adjustment. This is really cool, so check this out. So this was global. Now let's do the same thing selective. You see this layer mask right here? If I come up here and click this black button, it'll make that mask go black. So for this technique, you're going to use a curves adjustment layer, multiply blend mode. I'm still in the multiply blend mode because remember, I'm darkening and I want to hide my adjustment. And now I'll do the same thing I did before. Come up here and click on the luminosity mask icon, and here's darks 1, here's darks 2, and I like darks 2, and I'm going to go ahead with my levels, and again, I'm going to pull in the shadow slider to the right a little bit just to tighten this up and move my highlight in to the left a little and my midtone to the left to lighten things up a little bit. And instead of clicking on this button, I'm going to click on this button right here, which outputs that mask to a selection. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button right here. And now I can simply paint my burning onto the image selectively wherever I want it. So I'm going to get a nice big brush here. Now remember, it's only targeting the darker tones. Let's start out with, let's say 50%. And I'm just going to start painting over areas that I want to get darker selectively. And how about like down in here, over here a little bit. And now I'm going to go down to maybe 30% and come over here. I'm going to go over it another time. If you go over it a second time, it'll get a little bit stronger. Now, I'm at 30%. I went over that area and this area and here. But you get the idea. So you're just looking for shadows and you're darkening your shadows. And that mask is in the form of a selection, and it lets you paint the adjustment wherever you want. It's pretty cool. So here's the before and here's the after. Now, here's a neat little trick. If you ever want to see what your mask looks like, just click this double arrow button right here, and you can see what that mask looks like. And you see how the actual selection is helping me to only get the darker tones. And so if you click the double arrow again, you'll see it. So that's how you do the burning with a selective process where you want to put it just where you want. Sometimes you can just get away with global. Other times you want to be more selective. But you're the one editing the images, and you may want to use both methods. You may want to do a global, and then later on in the editing process, you may want to use this same technique for more of a selective burning to darken some areas even further. Oh, and by the way, we're using multiply here, but if you want, like, say, a weaker effect, you could maybe try overlay or soft light. So let's click on overlay. And you see how it's not as strong. Now I'll show you. Here's the before and here's the after. So it's not as strong of an effect, but it adds a little bit of contrast because you're in an overlay blend mode. And you can also try soft light. It's not going to be that much different. But in this case, I'm generally going to use multiply. I think I get the most bang for the buck with multiply. But experiment around with blend modes, and they're easy to get to by just clicking these buttons up here. For this method now, let me show you how to do dodging. Now right now you'll notice I have a selection. You can see by the selection indicator. I'll be using another curves adjustment layer, but if I click this right now, it'll put that mask onto it, and I don't want that. We need to get rid of this selection. So if you click this button here, you'll remove the selection. And now we can click the curves adjustment layer button, put a black mask on it by clicking this black button right here. Now, instead of multiply, we're going to go into screen. And now let's click on the luminosity mask button. And this time we're going for highlights or lights. So we have lights 1 by default. Let's try lights 2. I'm trying to narrow down that light range. Let's try lights 3. And I think lights 3, but let's click on levels and refine it a little bit. Let's lighten it up by taking the highlight slider to the left so we can make a little stronger effect. Okay, and I think that's going to be good. Now this is global, and then I'll show you selected. But first, let's start out with global. We're going to click this button to output it to that curves adjustment layer we made. And now we could take a look. Here is the before, and here's the after. So that's global. Now I find with screen it's pretty strong, so you may want to take that opacity back some. And I would say maybe somewhere around here. 66%. Here's the before and here's the after. So that's a global dodging. But I'm going to go ahead and take this opacity and put it back up the whole way because just like I did before, I'm just going to keep this same layer here, but I'm going to put a black mask on it. So I'm going to click this button here. And now I'm going to show you how we can selectively apply this. Just like before, we'll click on the luminosity mask button, and we're going to find the lights to target the lights we want to dodge. So lights 2, and I think we settled on lights 3, and then we went to levels, and I took the highlight slider and started to drag it to the left for a stronger adjustment. I might even drag it even more to the left and make it even lighter, and even take this midtone, because I'm going to paint this on selectively. And now the difference here is, instead of going to the layer, we output it as a selection by clicking this button right here. And now we can simply paint on our adjustment. Now, again, screen is kind of stronger, so I'm going to start out with a lower opacity. But just for the heck of it, let's try 100%. I'm going to type my 0 key, and we'll see how strong that is. Yeah, you can see that's really kind of strong. So that's way too light. Let's undo it. If you come up to the CX or combo panel and click this button, you can undo your last adjustment. And now let's drop that down to, say, like 30%. And yeah, that's much better. Okay, and I might even go to 40% and just come over the highlighted areas. Now remember, I'm painting through a selection with that Lights 3 mask that I fine-tuned. And so we can just come along here and just paint what we want. And it's just that easy. And remember, you're only going to target the really light areas. And if you lift your brush and paint several times, you'll increase the strength of that effect. And also don't forget, if you want a not quite as strong of an effect, you can always try clicking the overlay button, and you can see here's the before dodging and here's the after. So it's a milder effect. And you can also try soft light just to see what you want. Here's the before and here's after. That's even milder yet. But we're going to leave it on screen for now. I think I like that, and you can see what it's doing. But that's that same method, dodging, only using it selectively. Now let's try another method. Okay, so we have a selection here. Let's go ahead and deselect it by clicking this button here. Let me get rid of these layers. To get rid of a layer, just come to this trash can right here. Click it, it gets rid of the layer. Click it again, gets rid of the other layer. We're back to the background layer. And I'm only showing you all these different methods because there may be one here that you like over another one. So I'm giving you a lot of options so you find one that you like and work with it. This method uses a color grading tool, but it's a little different twist on the color grading tool. So we're going to come up and click on the luminosity mask icon. We're going to start out by burning. We're going to find some darks that we like to target. So there's darks 1, here's darks 2. I think I'm going to go with darks 2. Let's go to levels, and I'm just going to tighten up the selection by moving this shadow slider to the right a little bit, and maybe move the highlight slider to the left, and maybe the midtones to the left, just to lighten things up a bit. Maybe I'll take the shadow slider a little bit more to the right, and I think that's good. Now we just output it to a color grading tool. Now what do we do with it at this point? I'm glad you asked. Now remember, I'm burning, and I have this mask controlling what I'm burning. Now, this midtone slider is what you want to start off with. You're going to get the most effect with this slider. So click on it and just start to drag it to the left. And you see all those darker tones darkening up. Now, if you want to affect the really dark tones, click on the shadow block, and you can move it to the left as well. But start out with the midtones. You're going to get your most bang for your buck. So here is the before, and here's the after. Now you can go back and readjust these sliders, or you could take the opacity and pull it back. Okay? So that's one thing you can do. But we can also, and that's a global adjustment, and that may be all you need. Let's try a selective adjustment with this same technique. And all you need to do is put this in a black group. So come up to the CX or combo panel, click the left side of this group icon button, put it in a group with a black mask. Now let me disable this. See this X right here? Click this button. You can see there's our adjustment. And if I click the X again, you're going to see we're hiding the adjustment. So I kind of like the way it looks. So I'm going to paint with a white brush. And if you don't have a white brush, you can click this button right here. And I think I'll start out with about 60% opacity. I'm going to type my 6 key for 60%. And now remember, this mask is only allowing that effect to go in darker areas. So I can just simply, I can get a pretty big brush here and I can just like paint. You see that? Paint over it once, and maybe I want this area darker. I can paint over it again. And just like that, start painting that adjustment on. But this way I can do it selectively. I started out showing you how to do it globally, and now I just showed you how to do it selectively. Now let's move on to dodging using the same method. Whenever you have a group opened up, it's a good idea to close it if you want to add another adjustment layer above it, because if you don't close it, it'll go inside of that group, and I don't want that. Let's exile this color grading tool. Let's click on the luminosity mask button. This time we're working for highlights. So that's lights 1. Let's try lights 2. Let's try lights 3. I think I'll go with lights 3. Let's go to levels. Let's do some adjustment. I'll move the highlight slider to the left to lighten up all those highlights to maybe somewhere right around in there. And I think that's going to be good. Now all we need to do is output it to a color grading tool. And now just like I did before, we're going to start out with the midtones because you're going to get your most bang for your buck here. So click on the midtone block and just start to drag this slider to the right. And you're going to lighten up those highlights. You see that? And then if you want the really light lights, click on the highlight block and now we can drag this to the right and we can lighten those up. Now here is the before and here is the after. So that's the global adjustment. And now if we want to do it selectively, all we need to do is put this in a group with a black mask. So come to this button, click the left side of the group button, and now we have a group with a black mask. Now we can selectively paint our dodging on. Now remember, we're painting on this group mask, this black mask, so we need a white brush. If you don't have a white brush, click this button. And I think I'm going to use a higher opacity this time. I'm going to try like 80%. And remember, it's only targeting the light areas. You see that? So I can hit these light areas. And remember, if you lift your brush and you go over a couple times, they'll get lighter. Now, obviously, once it hits pure white, you can't make it any lighter. And so you just dodge the areas selectively that you want. And it's just that easy. Now, I went over there, so I'm just going to come back and step back. I was a little too aggressive there. I should have had a smaller brush here. So I'm just going to paint right there. But it's just that easy. And now let's move on to another method. Let's X out of this color grading tool. Let's get rid of these 2 layers. I'm on that group. Click the trash can. Everything's gone. This group is selected. Click the trash can, it's gone. Now we can start afresh with a new method. Now this next method is going to be just a freehand dodging and burning, and this is a method that I really enjoy doing a lot. If you just want to get really creative and freehanded, without any masking, and you just want to dodge and burn freehand without any protection whatsoever. And what we want to do is come up to the combo or CX panel. Now, all the dodge and burn tools in TK8 have 2 sides to them. And I didn't show you that when I was doing the working from the multi-mask panel, but they work the same way. If you click the burn tool, it has 2 sides. To the left side, if you click it, you get a 50% gray layer in the soft light blend mode. If you click on the right side of the burn tool, you get a blank pixel layer in the soft light blend mode. Also, I do want to point out, whenever you click the burn tool, you're going to get a black brush. When you pick the dodge tools, you're going to get a white brush. Now, both of these methods, using the gray layer or the blank pixel layer, are going to give you the same results. And I prefer myself the gray layer because whether you're burning or dodging, it's easier to see your strokes in this gray layer than it is on this transparent blank pixel layer. The only reason I see forever using this blank pixel layer is if you wanted to, say you had some strokes painted on here and you Command or Control click on that layer, you can load what you painted as a selection, and you could use that later on for further adjustments. But that's the only benefit. And let me just show you what I mean. Right now, I'm on this layer here. Now, when you're dodging and burning, I recommend very low opacity because you have no selection holding back the adjustment. So I would recommend starting out at 10%. But to demonstrate what I mean by loading this as a selection, I'm going to use a higher opacity, like 70%. Now, this is not going to look good, but see that right there? I'm just going to paint on here like this. But now on a Mac, if I Command and click this, or on a PC, if I Control click this, you notice I loaded that as a selection. So then I could come and maybe get a hue saturation layer, and it puts that selection as a mask on there. And now when I adjust the saturation, it's only going to adjust the saturation in that area. You see that? But sometimes that's something that you really need. Now, does it just have to be hue and saturation? No, it can be any kind of adjustment layer. Or for any time you need that selected area to do something in Photoshop, whatever you decide that may be. I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer because I don't need it. It's selected, click on the trash can, it goes away. And I'm not going to use the blank pixel transparent layer. So I'm going to get rid of it by clicking the trash can. And now I'm going to show you my preferred method, which is the 50% gray layer. Now remember, I said start out with around 10%. You can always adjust accordingly. Now remember, I'm burning and it's freehand. And make sure you have a nice soft edge brush when you're doing this. So I'm going to paint over that once, twice, it's going to build up. Okay. And again, I'm going to paint here. Now let's go up to 20% and go over this area. See, it's going to be much stronger. So you got to be careful here. Lower opacity levels, 20 and under are going to be the best, and even like 5%. So if I type 0.5, that's shortcut to get 5% for a brush. And let me paint over this area once, twice, 3 times. And so we can just freehand burn here and really think like an artist and just, I love doing this. It's a lot of fun. It's very creative. And I call this burning without a net. You have no mask to control what you're doing. It's all up to you. And again, I'm at 5%. You see, I'm just lifting my brush and going over that area another time. Go into this tree once, twice, 3 times. There you go. Now here is the before and here is the after. So that's freehand burning. And don't forget, you always have this opacity. If you're too strong, you can pull this back and just, dial in as much of that effect as you want. I almost forgot to tell you this. We can also use a gray brush. See right here in the combo panel, or if you have your CX panel up, click on the gray brush. That gives you a 50% gray brush. I'm going to take this opacity back up to 100% full strength here. Now, if I put my brush at 100% opacity by typing the 0 key, I can erase anything I've done. You see that? Or I could lower the opacity to say like 10% and just kind of blend some areas with that too. So that's very important. And on that blank pixel layer, you would have to use the eraser tool. And you'll find that in your Photoshop tool well, and that's going to be this tool right here. That's your eraser tool. At 100%, it will erase the brush strokes, and at lower opacity levels, you can use it to blend the brush strokes or reduce the amount of the burning. And now for the freehand dodge, just click on the left side to get the 50% gray layer. Right side if you want a blank pixel layer, so whichever you want. And then again, you want to use the low opacity. I'm at 10%, and now I can do some freehand dodging, but you see that's way too strong. So I could step back 2 times, click this once, click this twice. And now I'm going to go to 0.5, and that gets me 5%, and now I can kind of dodge. And remember, when you lift your brush and start to paint again, it'll increase the amount. Or if you're on a mouse, you're holding your left click down and painting, just release it, and then left click and hold and start to paint again. But just like that, and that's how you would do the freehand dodging. Let me go ahead and get rid of these 2 layers. I'm going to hold my shift key down and click on the burn layer. That selects both, and click on the trash can. That gets rid of them. And now for another of my favorite methods. If you watch my full edit tutorials, you know I use this method all the time. And all we need to do here is click on the luminosity mask button. And we're going to start out by burning. And we want to select the dark tones. So I'm going to try darks 1, darks 2. Let's try darks 3. Let's try darks 3. And what I'll do is click on the levels adjustment and fine tune it. Let me take the highlight slider and drag it to the left a good bit, and maybe the midtone to the left a little bit. Tighten up the shadows by moving it to the right slightly to like right there. And now we can click on the burn tool. Now remember, the left side gives you 50% gray, the right side gives you a blank pixel layer. So I'm going to click on the left side, and that outputs that mask to a selection, and now I can just simply paint on my burning. Now I can use a lot higher opacity here. I'm going to start out with like say 40% because I'm painting through a selection, not freehand. So now I can start burning here. Okay, and I might even go up higher. I'm going to go up to like 60% and see how I can just start burning. Now I'm painting through a selection, and it's only targeting dark tones. So just like that, you just paint away and you do your burning wherever you want. I can go on this tree, whatever I want to do. But that's how you burn. Here's the before and here is the after. And remember, you have the opacity to just pull this back to ease off in the adjustment if you went too far. And don't forget about your gray brush right here on the CX or combo panel. At 100% opacity, you can erase, or at lower opacity levels, you can tone the effect down or blend the effect. And now for dodging. Now you notice we have a selection. We don't have to worry because whenever you click on a luminosity mask, the selection goes away. And now we need to find some lights that we want to target. So this is lights 1. Here's lights 2. Let's try lights 3. I think I'll go with lights 3, but let's click on levels and fine tune this. So I'm going to take the highlight slider and drag it to the left to really lighten up the light areas, and maybe move the midtones to the left a little bit as well, and maybe the shadow slider to the right just to tighten up the selection. And now let's output it to a 50% gray dodge layer by clicking on the left side here. And now we're going to simply be painting through a selection and dodging. The dodging effect can be a little stronger, so I like to start out with a 10% brush opacity. So I'm typing my 1 key, and let's just start painting on here. Okay, and remember, if you lift your brush and paint again, or on a mouse, you're holding your left click and painting. If you unclick and then click and hold again and start painting, it'll start to build up that effect. And so just start dodging. And if you need more, let's go up to 20%. I think I can get away with it. Yeah, 20%. But you see what I'm doing. I'm just painting along there. But remember, that selection is only targeting light areas. Okay, so I can be, I could have a nice big brush on here if I wanted to. I'm going to go to 30% and just paint along here, lifting a couple times, and see how I can just really lighten that up. Okay, and don't fault me and say, hey Dave, that's way too light. I'm just demonstrating how this works. That's all I'm really doing. Here is the before and here is the after. And don't forget you have the opacity. And don't forget about your gray brush to erase, blend, or tone the effect down as well. I have one final method to show you, but before I do that, I'm going to show you a hidden feature in the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. And remember, if you want to see a video on hidden features, maybe this could be a prelude to that tutorial or that video, and it's dealing with this method I just taught you. Let me go ahead and delete these two layers, and I'll ask you a question. Do you want to make a mask instead of a selection to control dodging or burning? Now remember, I just used the selection to control dodging or burning, but do you want to use a mask to do it? Let me show you this hidden feature, and I'll demonstrate it by burning. So what you do, the same thing I showed you, same method, click on the luminosity mask button. We're going to burn, so let's find a darks tone we want. Darks 1, darks 2, darks 3. It's going to be darks 3. Let's go to levels. Let's go ahead and lighten that up a good bit. Take the midtone slider to the left a little bit. Tighten up the selection by moving the shadows to the right to right there. And now here is the twist. We're going to burn, so I'm going to use the 50% gray layer. It works if you use the gray layer or the transparent layer. On a Mac, hold your command key down and click on whichever side you want. I'm using the 50% gray. If you're on a PC, control click this. I'm on a Mac, so I'm holding my command key down and I'm clicking this. And you notice what happened here. On this 50% gray layer, I have this mask that I created with the multi-mask panel, targeting just the darker tones. And now all I need to do is paint on the 50% gray layer with the black brush provided. I'll type my 4 key for 40%, and now look, I can just simply paint it on. I'm no longer painting through a selection. I'm painting right on the 50% gray layer with black paint. And you'll notice my strokes are a lot darker, so the effect's going to be a lot stronger. So a little tip here is you may want to drop that opacity down to maybe start out at maybe 10%, because it's going to build up a lot stronger because your painting was just solid paint on there. So bear that in mind. You're not painting through a selection. If you were painting through a selection, you could use a lot higher opacity. And for dodging as well, all you have to do when you're in the multi-mask panel is hold your Command Mac, Control PC. When you come to dodge, hold the Command or Control down and click, and it'll put the mask on the layer, the 50% gray layer. I have one final method, and if you watch this far, congratulations. I know this is a longer tutorial. Let me go ahead and this layer selected, click on the trash can, get rid of it. This one comes from an action, a TK action, so click the TK actions button. This is paint contrast. You can dodge and burn by darkening the darks and lightening the lights, or you can just add overall contrast with this action. Just click on paint contrast and a color picker comes up, and you notice it's dead set right here at 50% gray. Right here is where you do your overall contrast. It'll lighten lighter areas and darken darker areas. And let's demonstrate that. Let's click OK. And I'm going to take my brush up to about 50% opacity, and I'm just going to start painting over an area. Let's take it higher. I'm going to take it up to 100%. See when I paint over an area like this? Let's see. Here's before. Just look at the area I painted. Here's before and here's after. See how it just added contrast there? So you can just go ahead and paint away. All right? Let's undo that. Let me step back a couple times. And now let me show you how to dodge and burn. Had to step back more than I thought. Now, by the way, this action gives you a blank pixel layer in the hard mix blend mode, and that's one of those special blend modes that use fill, and it's set at 15% for you by the action, which is really great. Now, here's another little tip. If you want to burn, click the black brush. If you want to dodge, click the white brush. If you want to add contrast, click the gray brush. So you can go back and forth to whatever you want and do it all in one layer. So let's burn first. Let's try 100% and see how strong. See, that's really strong. Let me hit the undo button here. Let's go down to about 50%. And now, watch. I can just, any area that's dark will get darker. That's way too much too. Let me step back one more time. Let's go down to about 30%. So I'm going to go ahead and paint on there just like that. In any area I go over, the darker tones will get darker. Now, if I want to dodge, all I do is click on the white brush. Now, I'm still set to 30% opacity, and light areas will get lighter. So isn't that nice? I'm going to come up here and zing a little bit of light across here. And that same principle holds true if you lift your brush or unclick your mouse and then click and paint again, you'll increase the effect. And again, if you want to start adding contrast, click on the gray brush. Now, that one, I usually take that up pretty high. I'm taking it up to 100%, and then I can just start painting overall contrast in an area. So this is pretty cool. You can dodge, you can burn, and you can paint contrast all on one layer. Here's the before, and here's the after. And I'm not trying to do a great job here. As I said before, this is just showing you how all this stuff works. Well, there it is, everyone. This was my dodging and burning workshop. I tried to cover as many dodging and burning methods as I could. I hope you enjoyed this one today. And if you want to see a hidden features video, again, let me know in the comments section. If you enjoyed the tutorial today, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you're not yet a subscriber, please subscribe and click that bell notification icon. Every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll get a notification. And I want to thank each and every one of you out there for joining me today in the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. And I will see you all right here next time. But until then, happy editing!